Hello, and thanks for joining us on another episode of Canada Files. I'm Jim Deeks, and I always get particular pleasure when I get to chat with women who have made their mark in business. Perhaps that's because when I was growing up, there were so few businesswomen in Canada. Our guest on this edition is Nancy Southern, one of the most revered women in Canadian business today, as chair and CEO of publicly traded ATCO Ltd, based in Calgary, Alberta. ATCO is a 74-year-old company, co-founded by Nancy's father and grandfather, and largely built by her father, which today holds assets of more than $22 billion, operating in dozens of countries around the globe, and employing more than 6,500 people. Nancy Southern, thanks so much for joining us on Canada Files.
Well, thank you, Jim. I'm very honored to be here with you today.
Well, you're most welcome. And let me start by asking the fact that you are not the first child by any means, and certainly not the first woman to take over a successful family company. But when you were appointed president and CEO in 2003, were you conscious of any degree of cynicism, if not downright contempt, for the fact that your father, Ron Southern, basically handed the reins over to his daughter?
I was very aware of the skepticism of me taking the role. And I think back on how it actually occurred. And my dad was really quite a master at providing people with real responsibility. He'd check and check. But I think he felt quite confident that I could manage my way through. I think my previous lives before taking on the CEO role helped me a lot. But the thing that really spurred me on and actually made me excited about taking on the role was the fact that a number of people who I highly respected said I wouldn't be able to do it. And it took me several years, maybe even more than a decade, to recognize passive resistance or being a bit patronizing towards myself in many circumstances. But I think the other thing that my mom and dad have taught me is to persevere and be determined and have the courage to look the skeptics in the eye. And I've always believed very much in my instincts and my guts and followed through with them.
Do you think, in view of your experience, do you think that nepotism is generally an unfair accusation for people to make in these kinds of situations?
Well, I think that it's a little bit like corporations are bad. You can have a few bad apples, and then reputation seems to snowball. And I think that's the same with nepotism, because I think a degree of education and a somber understanding of real responsibility and fiduciary responsibilities is absolutely necessary. And for me, the prospect that was our co-founders, my grandfather and my father's wish, was that ATCO could go on through generations and provide career opportunities for so many people throughout not just Western Canada, but around the world.
For those of us, and probably a lot of our audience in the United States who don't know about ATCO, tell us a little bit about how the company got its start and the scope of the company today.
It really was caused by demand as oil and gas was discovered in Alberta. And there was a great rush to develop these incredible resource and reserves.
Excuse me, that was in the late 1940s, correct?
That was in the 1940s, yes. The first natural gas discovery was in 1908, actually. But when oil was discovered in the Turner Valley and Leduc fields, that was when the gold rush started. And a very harsh environment, weather-wise, and absolutely no people. And so the people that went to work in the oil patch in those days found themselves looking for a farmer's silo to live in, or a tent, or a tar paper shack. And as it turned out, there was a man from Shell who said, I need to have a better way to look after the men in the field. And my grandfather started bringing in holiday trailers. He, in fact, bought, I think, 14 trailers. And they started renting them out. And there was just a plethora of demand for them. And this man from Shell said, no, I need something sturdier and more permanent, but easy to move to the next site. And lo and behold, a whole industry was born, modular workforce housing. It's just a ubiquitous box, and it was scratched out on the back of an envelope. And my dad and my grandfather and a few founding members of the ATCO team went to work at building these units. My father was 17 years old when the Alberta trailer hire was formed. And we've grown from the little Alberta trailer company that in its first year posted a $600 loss to a $22 billion asset base around the world, and products in over 100 countries around the world.
We're going to fast forward a bit. In 2003, your dad, and I assume with the board's approval and blessing, appointed you president and CEO. Let me ask you this, though. Did you want the job at that time?
The importance of your governance responsibility in a family legacy was very, very, it was transparent that we had to understand the businesses so we could make good decisions. Whether we were leading the companies or not, we had to be able to make good decisions. And so by that time, I'd spent about 8 years in the boardroom. Throughout that entire time, I was on audit committee and did operational audits with a great group of directors that coached me and mentored me. And I felt very comfortable because from the time I can remember, when we lived in a little 800 square foot home on our little trailer lot, we talked about business at the table, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I do feel I am very privileged to have been brought up a child of commerce. And so commerce came naturally to me, and I love it.
Was there a business philosophy or business advice that your dad gave you as you were getting into business, or did he kind of hand the reins over to you and kind of throw you in the pool and just expected you to sink or swim?
No, he was very thoughtful and considered about the approach. And we started off as co-chairs and then moved to co-chairs and co-CEOs, then chair and co-CEOs. And so for about 5 years, I enjoyed having the best business coach that I could ever have imagined. Watching, I was able to go to him and ask him what he thought about things. We didn't always agree, but he really, I can't say enough about how much he did coach me and give me the room to express my own thoughts and views and actually make some obviously different decisions than he would have made, all the while supporting and cautioning me about the risks along the way.
Did you feel that you had to work twice as hard as everyone else, being A, a woman, and B, the boss's daughter, to prove that you had the mettle to do the job?
Absolutely. When I first was appointed CEO on my own, I took the opportunity for most of the year. I went out and met every single one of the people of ATCO around the world. And I talked to them about my vision. I talked to them about knowing that they must have skeptical thoughts about whether I'm going to be able to take things on. It was interesting because the first thought was something that you're almost alluding to, Jim. Maybe I would step in and just sell it all. And maybe I would run it into the ground. But in actually going out and meeting them and just being myself and exposing the fact that I'm pretty vulnerable, just like everybody else, then we started to build a very good relationship. And to this day, I host a number of open houses and town hall meetings, and I get great participation from the people of ATCO. And I think now I've proved, I've walked the talk, and we're here to stay. And we are an organization that will go on through the generations and provide many, many people with future opportunities.
You know, I suspect not many people really know what a chair of a major multinational company actually does. You get credit, of course, when the stock goes up, and you get blamed when the stock goes down, even though you may not necessarily have had much influence over the decisions that influence those gyrations. How deeply are you involved as chair and CEO today in the decisions that affect the company on a day-to-day basis?
Well, because I'm still an active CEO, I'm very involved in the decision-making and risk assessment of various projects and initiatives that we take on. But I think, you know, one of the criticisms that the Coalition for Good Governance in Canada has is that the chair should be a separate role from CEO. Whereas in the United States, where we're airing, the model is far more common to have a chair and CEO in the boardroom. And I have to say that while it is at times difficult to separate and wear your separate hats, there are some fiduciary issues that the board must take into account that are not related to what management says. I do think having a deep, deep understanding of the business and how it's running and who the people are, how you're planning for succession and development, where you see trends taking you down a different road, and so a business perhaps that's not going to be successful 10 years down the road, that is all so important to be able to inform the entire board about. And it's hard to do if the chair just sits in a 2 to 4 hour board meeting to get that deep understanding.
As you would well know, one of the unwritten rules of both corporate and personal wealth is the expectation that you being the company and the person, will donate lots of money to worthy causes. And ideally, if possible, even develop charities or institutions that are focused on the public good. Tell us a little bit about what ATCO does in a philanthropic sense, and you and your family personally.
Because we're so geographically dispersed and in very diversified businesses, instead of the traditional giving to excellent causes, the Red Cross, the United Way, all of those excellent causes, we realized that we were making those decisions from the center, and the people of our company didn't have an opportunity to participate. And if they were living in Fort Chippewa, northern Alberta, or in the Pilbara, Karatha of Western Australia, there were causes in those communities that were very important to them. And we've always felt that it was a privilege to serve in the communities where we work, and that we do have to give back. And so 15 years ago, we started an internal campaign called Employees Participating in Communities, EPIC. And every group in every location is able to pick their own charity that they want to make a difference in their community that year. And it's been remarkably successful. And it also demonstrates the heart and mind of ATCO in the communities, because they are our ambassadors. And in 15 years, we've raised over $42 million, donated to various charities and causes, including time. The company matches employees' contributions 100%, and as well as recognizing volunteer time that employees give to these charities. From I think all CEOs and chairs have their own personal interests as well. And because of our ability to manufacture modular housing, my favorite one right now, and I feel it's so important throughout North America, actually throughout the world, is to find a way to look after homeless veterans that have served our countries, to protect the freedoms that we enjoy today, and to see so many veterans homeless and not being looked after by the countries that they have served really breaks my heart. And so we've embarked on building out small campuses, small villages actually, with our manufacturing. And they're called Homes for Heroes. And working with various mustard seed or the Red Cross, homeless agencies that are looking after people and identifying veterans. And then we work with them. They have a place to go, a little tiny home in a box that's their very own. They can lock the door. They've got a kitchen, a nice little bedroom, all the amenities, and a nice little community center where they can go for PTSD counseling, or getting back into the mainstream world again, counseling, and finding them jobs and reuniting them with their families and friends. And for me, that is super, super powerful in terms of giving back thanks to those people of service that have done so much for our countries.
So what do you enjoy more, making money or giving it away?
Both. I really enjoy both. You have to make money in order to be able to give it away. And the other thing that I'm very proud of is the fact that our investors continue to enjoy increasing dividends. It's not something that money is just a way of keeping score. And it's not something that you hoard. It is something to share. And prosperity is something that really is a moral obligation for all of us, I believe. And so our companies have enjoyed in ATCO 28 years of dividend growth. And in Canadian Utilities, it's the longest standing record in Canada of over 40 years of dividend growth in the company.
As you well know, more than probably any other province in Canada, Alberta has been extremely vulnerable over the last, 75 years, since the late 1940s, to economic booms and debilitating downturns because of the province's dependence on oil and gas demand, mainly throughout Canada. And especially in those down years, there has been discussion in Alberta, public discussion, about the idea that maybe Alberta should just separate. And it's usually because of policies enacted by the national government in Ottawa. As a leading business person in Alberta, how do you personally feel about Western alienation? And do you think it's justified?
I believe it's justified.
Interesting.
It wasn't that long ago when it cost a lot more to ship by rail products from the West to Central Canada. There was a great discrepancy in transportation rates. I do think that when you look at the financial hub of Canada, there is a tendency, and it's a human tendency. If you get comfortable with the environment that you're in and around and surrounded by. And so it's very difficult to reach out and go someplace else and try to be understanding or empathetic about the situation at hand. I think Alberta has enjoyed tremendous riches from its resources. And we have contributed in Alberta and Western Canada, Saskatchewan as well, contributed greatly to the prosperity of Canada. I think the model of transfer payments in Canada is ancient and brittle and needs to be revised and looked at hard. I don't believe in separation. I think we are so much stronger as a federation of provinces. And I know that that's the way that most Albertans feel. And there is anger, but you know, that also comes with the economic volatility that you talked about, Jim. If people don't have jobs or they're losing their homes, then the first thing that happens is you get angry and you lash out at wherever you can. And it's not necessary, and you feel helpless because there's nothing you can do about commodity cycles and boom and bust. Alberta is far more diversified than I believe people understand in Canada. Agriculture is second to natural resources. And of course, we have a great tourism industry with the Rocky Mountains right at our feet. I think we've had a tough time. When commodity prices started going down 2015, 2016, and then hit by very, very progressive green policies from the federal government, it's been hard to adapt in a 5-year period. You don't just turn the Queen Mary around on a dime. And there's still hardship out there. And then of course we layer on the pandemic, the coronavirus, and lockdowns, and small business left, right, and center going out of business, families losing their built up fortunes, small as they may be, but any equity they may have in their houses and their businesses is gone. And so you do have this sense of great frustration and anger, but I don't believe it goes as far as we are going to separate. We're going to fix this.
Nancy, you've received many honors during your career, including being elected to the Canadian Business Hall of Fame. Is there any one particular award or distinction that you've achieved that stands above the others?
The award that hits me so deeply is being awarded an honorary chieftainship by the Blackfoot Nation. And I was given the name Akikstawa Apaki. And
what does that mean?
It means brave woman. And I will never forget the day of my smudging and the ceremony and the presentation of my headdress. And I wear my headdress in ceremonies with great pride and a deep sense of gratitude to the indigenous people of Canada for all that they have contributed and all of the knowledge that they have that we haven't even started to touch the surface on.
As you may know, I usually end our interviews on Canada Files with one simple question. And in your case, I ask it of someone who has traveled around the world with the corporation and probably visited many other countries personally, and yet you are still very proudly Canadian. What does being Canadian mean to you?
A land of opportunity, still a frontier, and it's a land that we have to cherish and nurture, and I believe it is, for me, the best place in the world to live. The opportunities are limitless. If we just set our minds to it, work hard, and demonstrate the courage that all Canadians are known for.
Well, Nancy, you've been a significant role model, not only for your company, but for women across Canada, and I suspect for many CEOs of either gender during your career. Thanks so much for joining us on Canada Files.
Thank you very much, Jim. It's been a great honor, and I've enjoyed talking with you very much.
Thanks for that. And thank you for joining us on Canada Files. We hope you'll join us again on the next edition.
The preceding program was made possible through the generous support of Nona MacDonald Heaslip, as well as the following donors: the Browning Watt Foundation, Joe and Marie Heffernan, Michael and Mary Ellen Hogan, Donna and Richard Ivey, Alice and Ted Kernahan, Richard and Gail McGraw, the Bruce H. Mitchell Foundation, the North Pine Foundation, Eleanor and Francis Shen, the 63 Foundation, John and Margaret Deeks, Wendy Deeks, in memory of Peter A. Deeks, and by the Central Canadian Public Television Association.